Hi, it's Logan here. I just wanted to go through something that I briefly mentioned in my first video when I was doing the running chicken nebula and talking about the light leak that I had while imaging, and just quickly show you this is the issue that I was having. So here's a single uncalibrated sub, and I noticed there was this curve of change of brightness over here from lighter to darker. And also notice this area was a lot lighter than usual. Now there is amp glow coming from the ASI 1600. It has a bit over here and a bit over here and some over here, but there seemed to be too much. And I wasn't really sure what was going on, so I continued imaging that night. And then the next night I decided I need to do some darks. And when I started doing the darks, I checked them and I noticed that I had the same curve over here and a lot of brightness going on over here, and thought, this is a bit suspicious. This is the same thing that I had in the light frame, so it is some sort of artifact and maybe some light leak going on. And I wondered where it was from, and the first thing I could think of, since I had the observatory room in darkness, the lid on, lights out, was perhaps the camera that I had looking at the telescope so I could see what was happening when it was slewing around, whether it was something to do with the infrared LEDs on it. So I went and switched the camera light off and did a dark frame again, and suddenly no little line over here, a lot less brightness over here, and just the usual amp glow expected. And that evening, when I did my running chicken nebula photos, once I had determined how the light leak was getting in there, I noticed that this was all back to normal. Now, the issue I was obviously having, and I know there's probably people sitting there going, well, you know, obviously you have to cover up these holes, but I hadn't really thought about it, and it hadn't been an issue because previously, before I was in the observatory, I had been imaging on the driveway, and there was not really much in the way of light getting in at all. And I was more worried about dust getting in here, but my camera, the ASI 1600, just screws into this hole here. It doesn't use these screw holes, which I presume are for some other kind of camera. And the ASI 1600 does cover up these holes, but doesn't cover up these holes. And it wasn't until I actually then covered these up and then put the camera back on that I noticed that still solved the problem. So clearly the infrared LEDs coming from the camera were getting in through these holes and causing the light to get in. So this is the setup that I have in the observatory, and I've got this camera pointing at the telescope so I can see what's happening when it's slowing around and moving. This is what it looks like during the day, and around here are some infrared LEDs, which when they come on in the dark you can just see them with your eyes as this little dull red glow. But when I actually got my iPhone out and took a photo, suddenly they became extremely bright and actually quite purple looking, and were causing reflection on the camera lens of my iPhone. So this was actually the culprit. And the reason why I was having the issue, and why I hadn't had the issue previously, was I always had the camera, when it was on the driveway, not as close, and also usually to the side. And this particular camera is pointing right at the back of the filter wheel, and so I've put black tape over here, and as a result, no more problems. So that seems to be the source of it. It was quite incredible actually. When I look at the observatory at night, it looks completely pitch black in here. If I'm on the outside or looking in from the house, it looks completely black. But I've got another camera looking at the observatory, just checking that everything's okay, and what it sees is like I've got every single light on in the observatory, and this is really just the infrared LEDs glowing from that little camera. There's a very bright spot here because I have another camera pointing up at the sky, but anyway, so for anyone as silly as me who didn't cover up those holes on the filter wheel and have a camera, particularly with infrared LEDs pointing at it, yeah, tape them up, and that will make sure you don't get the light leak happening that I had. Anyway, hopefully this might be useful for somebody.
No! Nosferatu!